Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I want to give an update on the 1600-gallon aquarium system. There's been a lot going on the last couple of months with this tank, and I want to talk about all aspects, both good and bad, on both the display tanks and all the equipment in the back. There's been a few changes to all the tanks and things going on, and I really just want to share what has been going on. You might notice the lights are out right now. It's because it's early morning, they haven't kicked on yet. If I had free time to shoot a video, I'll go ahead and put some aquarium footage up in the background now. To start off, I want to talk about the 480-gallon aquarium, everything that's been going on there. I added a bunch of corals to this tank in early January, mostly SPS corals, and for the most part they've been all doing really good. A lot of them have been basing out and going off their frag plugs onto the rock a little bit, showing some signs of branching coming out of a couple of them. So I've been really happy with that. And a lot of the other corals all been doing good. As far as things not going good though, there are a couple of things going on. One, I've been noticing that I've had a couple of LPS, one of my small bubbles and one of my frog spawns not looking so good. A few of the monoporos have started to not look good again. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. This happened once before a few months ago where I kind of had what I call like a mini coral crash, where I lost a handful of pieces. I'm not sure exactly what happened, and I'm kind of curious to find out. I still have some cyanobacteria that's growing on the sand. It hasn't really come out of the rocks or anything, but it's still something else that's been a concern. I've been stirring up big chunks of the sand in the back, and I have been noticing after I do a big stir up, it does cloud the tank up a bit, but the cyano doesn't seem to go back in those spaces. So I'm thinking there's just a buildup of nutrients in the sand bed in those particular areas. So I'm going to probably continue to do that. And because I've had a few corals that are acting up, I think it's time to go ahead and do an ICP test. Now, this tank gets very few water changes. We'll talk about that a little more with maintenance, but I have never done an ICP test. I think it's the right time to do one because I really want to get a thorough analysis of the water. I've had some friends like Brett at Cherry Corals tell me, it's a good idea to go ahead and do those tests periodically just to see if there's anything creeping up on you with metals or other elements getting out of whack. And because I don't do water changes in this system very often, I think it is a very good idea to do. So in the next week or so I'm going to try and get this sent out. We just had a cold snap of below zero weather, and I decided that wasn't the best time to mail this test out. As far as new stuff going on in the tank, there's also one big change I mentioned in my last video, and that is on the LPS section of the tank. Now, if you didn't notice, there is a massive bubble coral in the back now. The frog spawns and hammers on the right side of the tank have all been rearranged. And this bubble coral I picked up from my local fish store, Reef Plus, and it came to him by way of one of his customers that I think it just outgrew their tank. And it's understandable because the thing's bigger than a basketball when it's fully open. And the funny thing about this coral is that he had it in his store pretty early in January, and I couldn't get it because I was about to leave on vacation and a work trip, and I said, it would look great in my tank, but I just can't justify putting something like that in and doing a tank rearrangement right before I go out of town. I said if it's there when I get back in February, I'll pick it up, and it was. So I did a big rearrange. I fragged up some of the frog spawns I had and went ahead and got that bubble coral. It took about a week and a half, 2 weeks for it to get fully acclimated and opened up, but it's in a great spot where it's in low flow and a little bit lower lighting. It's just this mass colony that's grown out, and it just looks so beautiful because it has this green blotchiness to the bubbles. And I was surprised it was a little less challenging than I thought it would be to get it moved. And so I went over to the local fish store and brought a 5-gallon bucket with me, and literally we waved the coral around, got to close up a bit, and I was actually surprised that it fit in a 5-gallon bucket, but I was assured that it would, and it did, and I managed to get it into that 5-gallon bucket no problem. I got it home, and I didn't dip this coral at all. I just felt with something like this, and this is just a personal preference with bubble corals, is I don't like to remove them from the water and expose them to air. It's not that they can't take it, but those bubbles, when they're inflated, have so much more weight to them than a lot of other euphyllias do at times, and they don't tend to deflate as quickly and close up. So I was concerned about damaging the polyp, and unfortunately with bubble corals, that polyp gets damaged. A lot of times that could be a slow end for them. In either case though, I did get it home. I dipped the whole 5-gallon bucket into my tank and just put it right in, and the coral has been doing great. I'm just going to leave it right where it is. I'm not going to touch it, do anything with it. It does have some really long sweepers on it, which have interacted with a couple of the euphyllias around it, but I'm not that concerned about it, but it's something I'll definitely keep an eye on as these corals all continue to grow. And the euphilia garden, I think, looks a lot better now that it's all been separated out. Got a few more little frog spawn frags I gotta go ahead and get mounted to the rocks. I really want that whole section just fill in completely with frog spawn. Unfortunately, the orange one I had, it, again, is being afflicted by something kind of weird, and it's just not doing good, but I'm not sure what to do with that yet. We'll see what happens when the ICP test comes back. As far as fish go in the 480-gallon tank, I haven't made any new additions to the tank. I did get back into town, and I wanted to kind of assess the tanks and do some maintenance. I did, however, in the SPS section, add more flow. And I knew this was going to inevitably be needed, so I went ahead. I had another Rossmont MX 4100, which pushes out 4,100 gallons per hour. It's an AC controllable pump. I don't have a controller on it this time, so it's just wide open, going from the back of the tank to the front of the tank. And it's just giving additional flow in the SPS section. All the corals seem to be doing just fine, and I'm kind of thinking that when the Gyre 300 series come out, there's a good chance that I'm going to buy a pair of those and have them go back to front in random mode, just as I have the 250s on the other side in complete random mode. I think that's just going to help stir up that end of the tank a whole lot more. The SPS will like the flow, they'll take the flow, and it's such an important piece. But as some of these colonies are starting to grow a little bit more, I'm adding more frags. It adds more resistance to the water flowing through the tank, which slows it down. So there, I'm adding more flow for that reason. The only other inhabitant in this tank I'm a little bit concerned about is my clam. I think something's picking at it. I haven't really caught it happening, but it's been really looking closed up and stuff some days, and then I'll come and take a look at it on other days and it's wide open. So I'm not sure what's irritating it or bothering it. In either case, so I'm going to keep an eye on it for a bit. That is the update on the 480-gallon reef. It's doing good. I'm really happy to see this tank is coming along really nicely and with coral growth, and I just need to start adding a few more fish to it. Moving on to the 720-gallon tank. This tank's been doing great as well. I did have one issue with the tank itself in the past few weeks. One of my rear bulkheads for the overflows did develop a really tiny leak, and it was only a few drips a day. It was enough to cause a little concern. Now this is something that can be fixed a couple of different ways. The proper way to fix it would be to drain the tank down and, take the bulkhead off and reseal the gasket on there. One of the issues potentially with that for me is that the tank is got pond shield on it. It's not like a glass or acrylic where it's perfectly flat. There could be some little bumps and ridges in it, and this plumbing is all glued together, so removing that bulkhead means I'm going to have to cut plumbing. So I elected to kind of go with the easy fix, and I don't recommend this for most people. I decided to try it out, see how it works out, but I went ahead and I siliconed the outside of that bulkhead and also on the threading there. I did it a couple of times to see if the water got pushed up. It did, but I did discover there has to be very little pressure to no pressure behind this water leak, because generally if you try to plug a leak on PVC or ABS plastic with silicone, if there's any kind of pressure behind that water leak, it will simply push it out of the way and it won't be able to seal. In this case it did. We're going to keep an eye on it, monitor it. If it does develop a leak again, I will be draining the 720-gallon tank down, cutting that bulkhead off, and I will reseal it and probably pack it with silicone as well when I seal it, just to help ensure that it doesn't develop any leaks in the future. But I'll keep everybody posted on that. Other than that minor issue, 720 is doing great. The fish in here are doing great. I do have 3 new additions to the tank that are pretty new. The first is a Flamingi tang. Now, Flamingi tangs get quite large. This one's still pretty small. Has a little touch of lymphosis, and there's a couple little marks on its lateral line, but overall this fish is doing great. It was over at Rate Plus for a few weeks. It was eating really well, and I've been looking for one, and I decided, that something like lymphosis is viral. There's nothing you can do to really treat it. So I went ahead, got that fish, put it in. I also picked up a blonde naso tang and a pyrophoras tang, and both of those are doing is really good too. Now the naso tang does have some scratching on it, and I really think it's just, because the fish is still a little stressed, only being in the tank for a while, it's had a real dark tone, so those little scratches show up a whole lot more. Every now and then you catch that naso tang and it's bright, light gray coloration, and it's brightened up, and you can't see any of them. And it's been a little bit of fighting with some of the other tanks in the tank. Overall, those 3 got put in the tank with no kind of issues. Unfortunately, though, I did lose 1 fish in the 720-gallon tank, and that was my little clouded wrasse. And that was one of the very first fish that I put into this tank, and it's a little sad to see that little guy go. I'm not sure exactly what happened. All the other fish in both tanks are doing great, but unfortunately, I was looking around the tank and I saw him dead. I'm not sure what happened. It was a smaller wrasse, and it was at full mature size when I purchased it. It could have been the fish just reached its max age. It could have been that it grabbed a piece of food that was too big for it and choked on it. I honestly don't know. There were no signs of disease. The only damage to it, of course, was that they had started to consume that fish. In either case, it's been over a week since that happened, and no other fish are showing signs of disease or stress, so I think we're doing okay. One of the other things that's been going on in this tank, which I discovered is kind of unusual, at least I thought it was at first, was that my long spine sea urchins were starting to disappear in the 720-gallon tank. And I didn't understand what was going on here. One day, I noticed that the long spine sea urchins were starting to lose their long spines in a very consistent way, and I discovered that the little clown trigger and the dog-faced puffer together have decided that they really like the taste of long spine sea urchins, and they have proceeded to eat 5 of them now, which is funny because there's a couple of pincushion urchins and a Halloween urchin in that tank as well that they will not touch. Not sure if it's just because of the venom in the spines, or maybe it's putting something else off, it doesn't taste good, or can't get through those spines yet. But in either case, they've decided they like those long spine sea urchins, and I managed to catch on video them kind of towards the end stages where they literally have eaten all the spines off and have gotten down to the actual urchin shell itself, and they went ahead and they crack it open and they eat it. And it becomes a giant feeding frenzy. All the angels get involved, all the wrasses get involved, and it was a really interesting sight to see. So one of the other positive things I can gather out of this is that I have a new method in place to help keep the beak for the trigger and the puffer fish filed down. It takes a lot of work and a lot of chewing to get through spines on sea urchins and to get through the actual shell of a sea urchin. Now, I notice their beaks are both worn real nice because of that. I think it's a good natural food source for them. So I know they have eaten some rock boring urchins in the past, and those guys can get pretty cheap. So I think what I'm going to start to do is potentially buy a few of these cheaper sea urchins every now and then and throw them in the big tank so that they can have a natural meal. It's not something they get in a single day generally. They're working at it for a while, but I think it's a good distraction for those fish to have something that's a natural live food item, not just what I'm feeding. And the dog-faced puffer has gotten incredibly shy during feeding just because when I put the shrimp on the tongs, the porcupine puffer has to really have his own, although the other fish are starting to push him away from some of it. But the dogface has a little bit more difficulty getting in with all the other wrasses and triggers attacking the other tong. So I think something like sea urchins is going to be something that will be a good natural meal for them. So I'm going to continue to try and get some of those, toss them in there, and let them have a meal. Although I do have to figure out how to start picking up all these little sea urchin spine droppings that are everywhere, because they're starting to litter the bottom of the tank pretty good. That's the update on the 720 gallon tank. Now let's talk about general maintenance on the 1600 gallon system. And there has been a lot going on. When I got back from my vacation, my extended work trip, first thing I had to do obviously is get the protein skimmer cleaned. It had been 13 days since it was cleaned, and it was looking pretty awful, although it was still pulling waste out, so that was a good thing. Got that done, had to make an order with bulk reef supply, and then I went ahead and I started my maintenance. I dedicated a whole day to it, starting with the UV sterilizer. I went ahead and I had to replace the bulb. It was just over a year. I got the bulb replaced, I got the quartz sleeve cleaned off, and then I noticed inside the sterilizer some detritus had built up over time. So I went ahead, turned the pump on with everything removed, and I flushed all that detritus out of there as well, so that that chamber's nice and clean. I don't think it was affecting anything. It was just unsightly dirt that needed to go. Next thing I decided to do was get that Kimura peristaltic pump installed on the calcium reactor. Now, when I was on vacation, the calcium reactor adjustment was the biggest pain point. It required many adjustments over the roughly 3 weeks I was gone by my tank sitter and also my wife when I was on my business trip. And I decided, I saw that pump come out and I saw a few people try it, and I said, let's give it a shot. And I gotta say, being a little over a month into using it, I am pretty happy with it so far. I'm gonna reserve a final review on it for a while. We'll see how it goes in 6 months or so. But so far, it's working great. I am surprised I'm only dosing about 19 mils a minute, but it's working out great. I got some extra tubes for the peristaltic pump piece. I'll probably go ahead and get a new head for that pump as well. But I've been incredibly impressed with it. It is keeping the pH inside that calcium reactor within a 1/100th of a point of pH. So I really can't complain there. And it moves very little. So thus far, it's working good. I think the only thing I've had a hard time with on it is that I have a habit of checking that drip rate in the morning, in the afternoon, and sometimes at night, because I used to adjust the needle valve. And I find myself still doing that. Probably not a bad habit to keep, but something that I found I still do, and then I'm like, oh yeah, the pump's just got it going rock steady, and it's working just fine. I also decided it was time to rebuild the RODI unit that I have, with a 1.5 years of service on those membranes and thousands upon thousands of gallons of water run through them between tank fills and drains and refills. I felt it was time to go ahead and replace the membranes, the pre-filter cartridges, and the DI. Now, I've been doing pre-filter cartridges and DI without a problem, but because I was seeing a lot of cyano in this tank, I felt maybe there was a possibility something was getting into the tank in excess. Not sure, it was just a guess. And I felt it was just a good time to replace those membranes. I went ahead and I got 2 100 gallon per day membranes, so my unit could push out about 200 gallons per day. It does have a pressure pump on it to allow me to get up to the full 80 psi, because my water pressure in my house is only about 40, which really doesn't work well for a RODI unit, especially a 7-stage unit like this one. And replaced all the DI cartridges, pre-filters, everything went good except for one thing, which is one of the gaskets on the RO membrane cartridges got pinched, and it took me about 4 times to get it sealed back on properly without leaking, but that was a small thing to do. And finally, that same day, I did a 100 gallon water change on the 1600 gallon system. I know it's only 100 gallons, it's not really a whole heck of a lot, it's only about 5% change roughly. But I went ahead, got that water change done. I went ahead and mixed up a whole barrel of salt water And the water changes on this tank are incredibly easy because all I got to do is turn a couple valves, pump the water straight into the sewer, and then I turn a couple valves back to, seal that water off and put it back to normal flow, and then pump the water from the barrel into the tank. I think I'm going to start stepping up water changes a bit because I'm really curious to see what this ICP test holds. But we'll see what happens when this comes back. But for now, I'm going to probably try and do some water changes about once a month. One last thing I'll talk about is the refugium. The refugium tank has been doing awesome, and the mantis and the green serpent star have been doing great. Got some good footage of the mantis eating lately, and I'm really looking forward to making more of a mantis focused video again and try and get some more footage of the mantis shrimp eating. Overall, doing great. That's the update on the 1600 gallon system though. If anybody has comments or questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section down below. Of course, if you like today's video, go ahead, give me that thumbs up, let me know you like the content, and of course, if you want to see more on the 1600 gallon aquarium system and its progress, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.